So this is my attempt at a video diary for my time here in Auschwitz, at the Centre for Dialogue and Prayer, as part of my ordination training. Every year the college likes to take those of us who are training for ordination away for an Easter school, and this year we are here in Poland. We are spending the week at Auschwitz. This is going to be a difficult week, I think. Confronting the reality of one of the great genocides of history is going to be challenging. I think it's going to be painful. The place we're staying is just across the road from Auschwitz 1. We're going there this afternoon, and then tomorrow we're off to Birkenau. And I'm not sure how I will be. Visiting somewhere like this is not something you should look forward to. It's not something that you should feel excited about. But I think it's necessary, because whilst we may like to think that humanity is decent and kind, and the vast majority of people are decent and kind, we still have that capacity for cruelty, for inhumanity. We're seeing that again in our newspapers and on our TV screens. Look at how we talk about refugees and asylum seekers in the UK, particularly those who aren't from Ukraine, the people who are coming across on boats. We talk about them as being illegal. We talk about them as being scoundrels. Why are they coming here? The way we talk about them dehumanizes them. If we're not careful, the world can make the same mistakes it's made in the past. Today's been a hard day, physically, emotionally, intellectually. Auschwitz is not somewhere that is easy to get round if you have difficulty moving. The tour we were on today was over 4 hours long, and I had to miss some of it because I needed to find somewhere to sit down It is what it is. It is an old army barracks which was then converted into being the concentration camp. And so the roads are rough and ready. There's lots of stairs, not many places to sit down. But I'm still glad I went, as much as it hurt my knees, as slow as the walk back was, as stiff as I think I'm going to be in the morning. It was worthwhile. One of the things that struck me as I walked around was there is that stereotype of German efficiency, and everything in the Auschwitz complex was geared towards efficiency. Things weren't wasted. Clothes were recycled. The way that people were taken off cattle trucks on their way to the gas chamber was designed to be as efficient as possible. People were gently led to the gas chambers, to their inevitable death, on the promise that they were just going for a shower, that they would see their families and their friends and their loved ones later on, because the Germans didn't want to have a panic or a riot on their hands. But it was interesting that there was another group in Auschwitz at the same time as us, and they were proudly wearing the flag of Israel. It was a statement almost of defiance. You may have tried to efficiently wipe us off the face of the earth. We're still here. We're here and you're not. We survived. We go on. Tomorrow we are off to Auschwitz II, Birkenau. That scene that we all know so well of the train lines leading through that gate. The place where people were selected either for work or for death. Those who were fit and healthy were sent off to work, unless you were a woman. Women with children were sent off to their deaths. All children were sent off to their deaths. If you had a disability or you were unable to work, you were sent off to your death. And so I know which side I would have been sent to. Tomorrow is going to be another hard day. But I hope that it will be just as worthwhile as the day we've had today. So yesterday we went to Auschwitz too, Birkenau. Familiar scene to anyone who's seen any sort of film involving the Holocaust, with that famous gate with the train lines running through it. It's a massive, massive place, and I don't think anything prepares you for how big the place is. It was obvious being there that it is a purpose-built centre for killing people. It was designed for a purpose. Someone sat there with a ruler and a set square and measured things out exactly. Everything is there for efficiency. In a way, I can understand why people refuse to believe the Holocaust happened, because the scale of it is so unimaginable. But then that's why it's important that places like Auschwitz are preserved and kept for people to visit, so that we don't fall into those lies that the Holocaust never happened. It's that voice for those who had no voice. This was our story. And the people who maintain and run Auschwitz now walk that delicate line, because it is that memorial to the horror of genocide. But I spent quite a bit of time sat outside, because there are even less places to sit down in Auschwitz 2 than there are in Auschwitz 1, and so I was resting my knee, and so I watched people going in and out, and some people were there for a specific purpose. So I saw a Jewish father with his 2 sons, and he was taking them round as they remembered their history, as they mourned the loss of parts of their culture. But there were also what looked like school groups, with bored teenagers being dragged round, and tourists who were on the tourist trail. They were driving through Poland, so Auschwitz was on their to-do list, their bucket list. And I'm not sure how anyone can juggle those 3 different needs for people to be there. For Jewish people, for some Polish people, it is that sacred space. But for others, it was a field trip which they had to do for their school or their university. How much information and how much attention they paid, I wouldn't want to guess. And for others, it was just another site, like the Eiffel Tower or the Leaning Tower of Pisa. And that's the group I have difficulty with most. Because what are we saying about the value of human life if the place of a genocide is of no more value, no more importance than a wonky tower? today is Friday, and tomorrow we fly back to the UK. Today is Good Friday, and so this morning we returned to Auschwitz-Birkenau, and we had the Stations of the Cross. As I said on my Facebook page this morning, Stations of the Cross on Good Friday in Auschwitz-Birkenau is a definite emotional kick in the plums. I'm glad I did it. I don't think I will ever do anything like that again. The emotions that we have on Good Friday, amplified and magnified by the emotions that we have when we visit somewhere like Auschwitz. Especially when we first arrived and we were the first ones there. We had alone in that place. And when we got there this morning, it was grey, it was overcast, it was raining. There was a very different atmosphere. There weren't the Jewish youth groups with their Israeli flags being that symbol of defiance. There wasn't hope as people learned about what had gone on in a bid to never repeat it again. There was a sense of foreboding, but also as we went round, there was a sense of life. The spring flowers were starting to bloom. The birds were singing in the trees. As we walked from place to place, we could see deer running through the places where people were held. And as we come to the end of this week, it's interesting to think, how will I remember this? Because how we remember is important. How we remember is how we process what we have seen. So on Wednesday, we went to visit a church, which is just a few miles away from Auschwitz II, which has in its basement a purpose-built art exhibition by someone who survived the Holocaust. They were one of the very first people to go into Auschwitz #1. I have the book of it. Marian Kowalczyk, he had prisoner number 432, and after the war he went on and had a successful career designing theatre backdrops in Warsaw. But then one day he had a stroke, and suddenly he started drawing his experiences within Auschwitz and other concentration camps he'd been held in. This is a life his wife didn't even know he had had. And it was during his time in Auschwitz I that he met Father Saint Maximilian Kolbe. And Maximilian Kolbe is a big part of the exhibition. It was a strange experience. You go down the steps into the basement of this church, and when you walk in, there are wooden walls designed to look like the inside of a cattle car, and you then go into the exhibition and you're surrounded by all of these pencil drawings that Marianne had done, and if you spent all day there, you would still find new things to look at. It is purposely disorientating. It's purposely that you miss things. because that is how the Holocaust was for so many people. This mass of images and faces and horrors that you can't grasp it all in one neat package. And perhaps for me the most beautiful image within the whole thing, he had made a replica of the cell in which Maximilian Kolbe had died, and he'd put a sheet of glass in front of it with holes in it and a perfectly circular hole cut into it. And if you looked through that circular hole, it framed Father Maximilian in his cell, being supported by the Virgin Mary as he died. It was a beautiful, beautiful way of expressing what had happened. It was beautiful in its simplicity, it was beautiful in its theology. It was, for me, the highlight of the whole exhibition. And then when you come up out the other side of the basement, you very purposely left that hell behind and went up into a beautifully laid out garden. And part of why this was so important for me and how we remember things, because it was art as therapy. I think sometimes art therapy can get a bit of a bad reputation of misunderstanding. Or you've had some trauma, go draw a pretty rainbow or pretty flowers in a field. But this was him reliving what he had been through and making sense of what he'd been through his art, through his talent. And I think that's what we sometimes have to do. Use the gifts that we have been given to process what we have been through. Produce something beautiful out of the horror, however difficult that may be. I'm glad I've come on this week. It's not until you come to somewhere like this that you realise the industrial scale of the slaughter that the Nazis produced. But it makes me sad that we haven't learned the history. We haven't learned the story, because we go on and keep slaughtering each other. We slaughtered each other in Rwanda, Srebrenica, Bosnia, Darfur. After the Second World War, we said never again. And yet we continue to slaughter each other. We continue to label people as being other, as being undesirable, as somehow being illegal. And whilst we've been here, there are many of us who I've talked to who have been horrified at what our government is doing, shipping people that they do not wish to have off to another country, off to camps for processing. That seems eerily familiar. I hope and I pray that our government reverse this horrific, evil decision that they've made. I hope and I pray that they do, but I won't be surprised if they don't. I'm now back in the UK. I've been back now for about 10 days, and last week was interesting. I spent the first few days feeling like a proper zombie. I didn't realise how tiring the whole experience of being in Auschwitz for that week would be. As the week progressed, last week I began to feel a bit more human, and now we're getting back into the swing of normal everyday life. My daughter is off to school. I'm getting ready for college tomorrow evening, and already the experiences of Auschwitz are beginning to feel like a lifetime away. Looking back as I've been editing the video diaries, putting them together, I can see the effect that it had on me. That last video that I recorded on Good Friday evening, our last evening at the Centre for Dialogue or Peace and Prayer. I think you could see that I was drained. I was raw. These things are what they are, and I don't think we should try and hide our emotions when we are confronted with something like that. But then the question is, how do we remember what we have seen, what we have experienced? How do we remember events like the Holocaust? And I go back to what our tour guide, Lydia, said to us as we were going around Auschwitz number 1 on that Sunday. And she said, try not to get caught up in the sheer scale of things. When you go around and you see that mountain of shoes, and you see that huge pile of suitcases, you see all that hair, don't think about the individual scale. Focus on one pair of shoes. Focus on one piece of luggage and think about that person. And that is something that the Auschwitz Museum, the Auschwitz Memorial do on their social media. And if you don't already, I would encourage you to follow them. I will put it on the screen for you now, hopefully. So there you can see their Facebook page. And if you scroll through it, then it brings up people's pictures, people's stories. So there we have a story about 3 people who escaped. And as we go down, there's a story there of a Hungarian Jewish woman called Rachel, who was born in 1891. And it tells you that she arrived in Auschwitz in 1944 and was murdered in a gas chamber. And you can see that there is a picture of Rachel. And we are blessed, we are lucky to have these pictures, these stories, because towards the end of the war, when the Nazis knew that the Russians were on their doorstep, they started to burn all their records. They started to try and destroy the evidence of their crimes. They left maybe 10% of their records behind. They didn't have enough time to destroy it all. And so we have things like this. And if you are on Twitter, the Auschwitz Museum have a similar thing every day. So they have the same one on Facebook, the 3 people who escaped. And now We have a German Jewish woman called Rosa, who was murdered in Auschwitz in 1942 at the age of just 20. You can get these directly to your phone, and these are ways that we can remember, ways of just focusing on one person. Because these people aren't just faded pictures. These people were real people. They had hopes, they had dreams, they had likes, they had dislikes. They loved people, they laughed, they cried. And that is what we need to hold on to. These were human beings. So I'd like to conclude this video by thanking David, our college principal, for organising and leading our week. Looking on some of our WhatsApp chats of the people who went, we found it immensely gratifying. It has enabled some people to ask deep and meaningful questions. Sometimes these are the first time they felt they'd had permission to ask these questions. Also, I'd like to say thank you to our chaplain, to C, who kept a lot of us sane in her own unique and special way that only C can do. But I want to finish by reading the Kaddish. It's a prayer of mourning in Judaism. It is originally written in Aramaic, which is the language that Jesus spoke, but it's not a prayer of mourning that we would recognize. It doesn't mention death. Instead, it's a praise of God. It's putting ourselves, our faith in, our trust in God. And if you are Jewish, if you have lost a parent, you'll say this every day for 11 months, and again on the memorial of that person's death, as well as the annual commemoration of the dead. If you are mourning a child, a sibling, or a spouse, you'd say it for 30 days, and then those annual events. Although there is a tradition now developing that those people, they said for 11 months as well. And this is the Kaddish. Magnified and sanctified is the great name of God throughout the world, which was created according to divine will. May the rule of peace be established speedily in our time, unto us and unto the entire household of Israel, and let us say, Amen. May God's great name be praised throughout all eternity, glorified and celebrated, lauded and praised, acclaimed and honoured, extolled and exalted, ever be the name of thy Holy One, far beyond all song and psalm, beyond all hymns of glory, which mortals can offer, and let us say, Amen. May there be abundant peace from heaven, with life's goodness for us and for all thy people Israel, and let us say, Amen. May the one who brings peace to the universe bring peace to us and to all the people Israel, and let us say, Amen.